Hey guys, and welcome to another one. Today we're going to be going over exam objective 3.5. I'm going to tell you pretty much everything you need to know about all of this. I'm going to do three things for you today. I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about this entire exam objective, and then I'm going to tell you the kind of questions they might ask you on your exam as we go through, give you some hints, tips, and tricks, and finally at the end I am going to give you some practice questions to actually test your knowledge based on what we've talked about today in this exam objective. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get straight to it. We're going to start off with the first one, which is motherboard form factors. Let's kick it off and get into it. So guys, look, motherboard form factors. Remember what that term form factor actually means. It basically just means the size and shape of a thing. So for your exam, you need to know about three different specific types of form factors. You need to know about the ATX, you need to know about the MicroATX, and you need to know about the ITX. For the sake of this one, just forget about the word mini there, just ITX. You need to know about the three different form factors and types of these motherboards, and you need to be able to essentially say, okay, based on your needs, I'm going to recommend you this particular type of motherboard. And long story short, as a broad overview, the differences are the ATX, the standard ATX, is much bigger and offers more capabilities for expansions. This is a full-sized desktop setup. So you can see here, you've got a lot of opportunities for expansions in those PCIe slots. Okay, there's a lot of room for potential expansions there. Whereas in the MicroATX, it's a little bit smaller. There's still some room for expansion, but not as much. It's not as large. You're not going to be able to fit as much in there. It's not going to be as highly or easily customizable for the MicroATX. And then the ITX, we get even smaller. Basically, you've got next to no customization on this thing. This is just a space-saving motherboard, and you're really not going to want to go with this if you want to do pretty much any level of customization. This is like really, really small machines, right? Really, really small pieces of hardware, really, really small devices. So that's a broad overview, guys. Let's go ahead and get into the specifics now, starting with ATX. So take a look at this image, right? Look at all of that customization. Look at all the potential for expansion that we have here. Look at how many things we can fit in that. The ATX motherboard is pretty big. It's pretty huge. It's the one you are going to want to go with if you are going to want a lot of expansions, okay? It is, and here's a key thing you need to know, 12 by 9.6 inches, which translates to 305 by 244 millimeters, but 12 by 9.6. Remember that number, and simply remember the thought that this is the one with the most amount of expansion slots. Typically, it offers up to 7 expansion slots. All right, so that's a lot of capability for expansions. It also uses that standard 24-pin power cable. All right, the 24-pin power cable is used in this. If you want to have a lot of expansion, if you want to have a lot of space availability for that expansion, you're going to want to go with the ATX. Long story short, that's mostly what you need to know for that. It's the biggest, it's the one that offers the most capability for expansion. Okay, let's move to the next one, which is MicroATX. Now, look, it's a little bit smaller, right? It's not quite as big. It is a smaller size, 9.6 by 9.6 inches, right? Instead of those 7 expansion slots in the ATX, we now have about 4 expansion slots. So you still have some capability for expansion, but just not as much, right? So if you want to do a little bit of expansion, but you also want to save a little bit of space, this might be the one for you. It has sufficient connectivity, so it is a little bit smaller, but it still has enough connectivity for most users. It has a good amount of SATA ports, USB headers, and PCIe slots. So it's got everything most people need, really. If you're not going to completely deck out your computer, you could probably get away with a MicroATX. You don't really need to put in a lot of expansions for most people's day-to-day uses. I myself, I have never put in an expansion in my desktop that I have, right? I would absolutely go with a MicroATX over an ATX just because I don't need to expand that much. I don't have the need for it. Okay, so that's just the main difference so far. ATX bigger, more expansion. MicroATX smaller, less expansion, but still a decent amount of room for improvement and expansion there if you want to. That's in contrast to the ITX. Okay, have a look at this bad boy. This is absolutely tiny. The ITX is particularly small. It boasts a very modest size of 4.7 by 4.7 inches, so the smallest of the ones we have looked at so far. And You have even smaller ones, right? 3.9 by 2.8 inches. It gets tinier and tinier, the ITX. Long story short, you just need to know that the ITX is the smallest of the three, and it has the least amount of expansion capabilities of the three. ITX are designed for small form factor systems, right? Devices that are particularly small. They have a priority when it comes to space saving solutions, right? If you want to save space, ITX is going to be the one, right? You don't want to do a lot of expansions and you want to have it in a very small, tiny machines, ITX is going to be the one that you want to go with. Here is a summary of everything we just talked about. You can pause, take a screenshot, take a snapshot of that. All right, but basically for your exam, you're going to need to be able to compare these three motherboards. You'll probably be given some sort of question about which one should this person use based on the requirements they have given you, or they might say, here is a motherboard someone is using, here are the characteristics. Based on that description, what type of motherboard are they using? That might be the kind of thing you have to answer for your exam. Let's move on to motherboard connector types. And it's really important to note, guys, you should be able to visually identify each of these connectors before taking your exam. If you're not confident visually identifying these, definitely put that exam on pause, come back and make sure you are confident in doing that. Okay, so the first one we're going to have a look at is the PCI. We've talked about PCI and PCIe, right? It looks like this, okay? PCI versus PCIe. It looks something like this. Remember, PCI is basically the older version compared to PCIe. It is where you can plug in expansion slots. Now, a lot of the time on the motherboard, you'll actually be able to see PCI laid out in plain writing on the bottom. So that can be a dead giveaway. Another way is people sometimes get these confused with RAM slots when they first start out. These don't have that lock-in mechanism. With RAM modules, as you push in, you have these snap-in mechanisms on the end there that lock it in. These don't. So that could be a way that you differentiate it if you are completely new. But just make sure you can visually identify that and understand that a PCI slot is the older type of expansion card slot. Okay, so it allows hardware components to connect and communicate with the computer's motherboard. If you want to attach any kind of card, such as a graphics card, a sound card, a network adapter, really any kind of expansion card at all, you would be using, you guessed it, a PCI slot if you were back in the old days. But nowadays we have the PCIe or Express, which is just a faster version of that essentially. And let's get to that, guys. This one's going to be super simple. It's pretty much the same thing. You can visually identify it because it has PCI and then E right there next to it, and it looks quite similar. All right, you can identify it because it is PCIe, and you really just need to be able to tell the difference. That's what you need to functionally understand is that it is the faster upgraded version when compared to PCI. Specifically, how is it faster? Well, PCI relied on a parallel connection to transmit data, but PCIe uses something called a serial connection. So what that means is instead of transferring data all at once across multiple wires, instead PCIe sends data one bit at a time through a single wire, otherwise known as a serial connection. Okay, so basically it's simpler, faster, and more reliable. So that's why it is faster. Do you need to know that level of detail? Honestly, probably not really. You just need to know that PCIe is in fact faster version of PCI, and that's roughly what it looks like. So be able to look at a motherboard and identify it and know what you use it for. All right. Now, the next one is power connectors. Okay. We're looking at power connectors. You have multiple different power connectors within your motherboard to power the wide variety of devices that are there. We're going to run through a couple of the key details that you really need to know for your exam. The first one is you've got some voltage variations. Different connectors and power connectors will put out different specific voltages depending on what it is they're trying to power. The three you need to know about for your exam, and they specifically list, is the 3.3 volt, the plus or minus 5 volt, and the plus or minus 12 volt. So what you need to know is that these are the three voltages. So your exam might ask you, which of the following is not a common voltage within a motherboard power connector? Which of the following does not belong? And you'll need to be able to identify, oh, okay, this one is not a type of voltage that is actually used in the motherboard connector. So you need to know these three are, and other ones are not, right? So the 3.3 volt is generally used for obviously quite low power components. The 5 volt, you're looking at some USB ports and certain logic components, and the 12 volt powers those high demand components like your fans, hard drives, graphical processing units, etc. All right, so just understand those are the 3 voltages and roughly what they might power. Okay, we also need to know that the power connector itself that provides the power to the motherboard itself has 24 pins. All right, we need to know that it is a 24 pin connector. It used to be a 20 pin connector, but now it is a 24 pin connector, and that provides power to the motherboard. That's it, really. Of course, always turn off your power supply before doing anything. It's just a general sense of safety thing. Now, many modern motherboards require extra power for the CPU, which is why there's an additional 4-pin ATX connector that you can use in order to provide that additional power. So that is something worth knowing as well. There is a 4-pin additional connector to provide that extra power to the CPU there as well in a lot of cases. So there's been quite a lot of evolution when it comes to the power connectors that we have, right? It started off with 20 and then it went to 24 pin. And then we added in that extra separate CPU power connector that we were just talking about, that 4-pin power connector for the CPU. So it's slowly evolving, and that kind of represents the fact that over time, we're getting more and more powerful components, so we need to find ways to give more and more power. But just again for this, guys, you'll need to be able to say, these are the 3 voltages that do commonly take place within a motherboard. The power connector has gone from 20 to 24 pin. It is a 24 pin connector. And you also have that additional 4-pin CPU power connector there as well. But that's really what you need to know. Now we're talking about SATA, guys. We've talked about SATA to death. I'm not going to really stick to this one too hard. We're going to be having a look at SATA. We need to be able to visually identify it. We know by now SATA connects hard drives internally, okay? SATA is used to connect hard drives internally in the motherboard, and it looks like this. You can easily identify a SATA cable by that little lip, right? It has this shape to it. A little lip, little lip. See that lip? It's like that, and then down. That's how you identify the SATA cable. That's the best quick trick that I use to be able to identify it. That's pretty much it, guys. Look, we went through the speeds in a previous exam objective. We went through these speeds, and we talked about the trick, how 1.5 in SATA 1 doubles to 3 in SATA 2, and that doubles to 6 in SATA 3, and then it goes to 16 in the next iteration in fast SATA, I believe it was called. But really, just visually identify it and know that it's used to connect to hard drives. And for this exam objective, that's it, right? If you're looking at a motherboard, you should be able to say, hey, that's SATA. Next one is eSATA. Guys, eSATA is the exact same as SATA, the only difference being eSATA is connecting an external drive. So the external drive is on the outside of the motherboard, right? It's a drive that you've got outside, and you connect it to the motherboard with an eSATA cable. Now, really, you just need to know eSATA is the same as SATA, but it's on the outside instead of on the inside of the case of the motherboard. This is actually, here's a pop quiz for you. Which of these two is SATA and which of these two is eSATA? Take a few seconds to have a guess right now. Hopefully you should have been able to do that. The SATA has that lip, but the eSATA, look at that, no lip. So that's a key giveaway. Again, the SATA has that little lip. The eSATA does not, all right? So just be able to visually identify it and know that eSATA is like a SATA cable, but for the outside, essentially. Long story short, right? Now, the next one is headers. Headers is all that fun stuff like your USBs, audio headers, your fan headers, front panel headers, anything really that you're plugging in from outside is the header. So they look something like this on a motherboard. Just be able to identify, hey, these are the headers. This is what I'm going to plug things from outside to inside the motherboard, right? If I want to plug in an Ethernet cable, if I want to plug in a USB, if I want to plug in any of these things, sound, visual, audio, etc., that's going to be on the headers component. And it looks like that. That's pretty much what you need to know. And then we need to know about the final one for this little dot point, which is the M2. All right. We've looked a lot at M2. We know it's a form factor of the solid state drives, of SSDs, and you can attach it directly to the motherboard through an M2 slot on the motherboard. And you can do that using a single screw. You just slip it in there, use a single screw to insert it into the motherboard. Instead of using the SATA cable, this connects directly with the motherboard itself, so it's much faster. And we also talked about how you can use M2 drives in PCIe slots in order to get that really fast connection, right? If they're NVMe capable. that's not really this exam objective. That's just a throwback to help you make that connection. Now, we know what it is. We know what it looks like. Just know that you can really, this is what the actual connection might look like on a motherboard, and you would just attach it with a single screw. If you need to, you can go like watch a YouTube video on physically how to do that. I'm trying to cover all the content we can with just the information you need to know here. So if you're not sure, you're still a little bit confused about that, go look up a video tutorial on how to install M2. But pretty much just know this is roughly what the interface would look like. And we've already talked plenty about what an M2 drive is. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Just remember, guys, for this one, it's really important that you can visually recognize each of these connections. If you can't before you take your exam, make sure you can, because they're probably going to ask you a question. Hey, here's a motherboard. What connection am I looking at here? They might have a picture of a whole motherboard and they might zoom in on one particular part of that motherboard and say, what is this? And if you can't visually recognize it, you're probably not going to be able to answer that question. Okay, so just go through, have a look at these photos right that I've put here and practice visually recognizing them. And also just go do a Google image search if you're not sure, if you need more help there. All right. Now we're moving on to motherboard compatibility. Motherboard compatibility. What that means essentially is, I have this motherboard here and maybe I'm really excited and I go out and I buy a CPU, but I didn't check the compatibility of my motherboard. So it turns out this motherboard is not actually compatible with the CPU that I purchased. So now I have to go home, cry, sell all my possessions, sell my house, sell my cat in order to afford a new CPU that is compatible. To avoid you that stress, just go ahead and check that your CPU is compatible with any of the components you intend to purchase. So, that your motherboard is compatible with the things that you intend to purchase. So you need to make sure it's compatible with the CPU. Motherboards are not compatible with all CPUs. They are compatible with specific CPUs. They are not compatible with all RAM types and capacities. So motherboards support specific types of RAM. They may have a DDR4 slot or a DDR5 slot. You are not going to be able to use a DDR5 RAM module if your motherboard only has a DDR4 slot. Right? So keep that in mind. Of course, expansion slots. You need to make sure that you actually have those expansion slots available. And you may want to make sure you actually have PCIe slots so that if you need a really high performing expansion card that you're putting in, then that's actually something your computer can do. Because if it only has PCI and not PCIe, you're probably not going to be able to do that, right? You're going to want to make sure that you have the right amount of storage connectors and that your motherboard can actually provide enough power for the components that you are going to be plugging in. Because if your components require 400 watts, but your computer can only supply 150 watts, it's not even going to turn on. Okay, so keep that into account. Just make sure everything is compatible at the end of the day is what that runs into. CPU socket types, all right? CPU socket types. As we just talked about when it comes to motherboard compatibility, some motherboards are only compatible with very particular CPUs. So you want to make sure that your motherboard is compatible with the CPU that you're purchasing. There's two primary CPU manufacturers. You have AMD CPUs and you have Intel CPUs, and they're both kind of got little pros and cons, but basically you just need to make sure that you understand the pros and cons of each, the differences between them, and the fact that motherboards will only be compatible with one of these really at the end of the day. So the first one is AMD, or Advanced Micro Devices. Now, in terms of performance, AMD shines in multi-core tasks like video editing, rendering, and multitasking, okay? They have very good value for money. They're delivering more cores and threads at a lower cost compared to Intel processors, which is the other one we're going to have a look at. In terms of power efficiency, AMD CPUs are often more power efficient, consuming less energy and generating less heat. So that's a key thing to take into consideration as well. If you are a gamer, you need to understand AMD has closed the gap in gaming performance, especially with their newer processors featuring technologies like 3D V-Cache. We don't really need to know what that is at this point to boost gaming performance. It's also known for maintaining socket compatibility across multiple CPU generations. That's key, okay? Across multiple generations, the sockets maintain usable. So that means, if you buy a CPU and 4 years later, maybe you want to buy a new AMD CPU, that means it will probably still be compatible with your current socket. You're not going to have to go and spend more money on a new motherboard with a new socket, which would double the amount that you have to spend essentially, right? You can pretty safely bet that if you want to upgrade your CPU over time, AMD would be a good one to go with because the socket compatibility lasts a lot longer than Intel. All right. So look, at the end of the day, AMD is ideal for users who prioritize multi-core performance, energy efficiency, and long-term upgradability. Right? That's the key. Long-term upgradability is going to be a big one there, guys. So holding all that in our brain, let's go ahead and have a look at the other one, which is Intel. All right. Having a look at Intel. Intel contrasts AMD when it comes to performance. It leads in single core tasks and high clock speed performance. All right. So single core tasks. In terms of the price, Intel CPUs are generally more expensive, particularly at the high end, but they justify the price with cutting edge features and consistent single core performance leadership. Now, power efficiency. Long story short, Intel CPUs do consume more power on average. So they're not as power efficient. They're probably going to generate more heat as well. So that's a key thing to take into consideration. When it comes to gaming, Intel does hold a slight edge in gaming due to superior single-threaded performance. All right, so that's something you may want to take into consideration. It's upgradability. It frequently changes socket designs with new CPU generations. So that's going to be one of the main keys, right? If you buy an Intel motherboard with a motherboard with an Intel CPU slot, and you decide you want to upgrade 4 years later, you're probably not going to be able to because they will have probably made a new CPU that is not compatible with your current slot. So if you want long-term upgradability, Intel probably isn't going to be the one for you. All right, so that's something to take into consideration. So its use cases. It's ideal for gamers, professionals, and users who prioritize single core performance. So long story short, we can really dial this down to AMD multi-core based tasks, much more affordable, and long-term upgradability. Intel, much more expensive, single core tasks, and is not great for long-term upgradability. So depending on what you want, there is what you're going to have to look at a scenario and say, based on what you want, you might want AMD or Intel, based on those things that I just covered then. And I wouldn't be too worried about the specifics of this, really. Maybe one question, maybe two, but in the bigger scheme of things, I don't think they're going to get ultra specific on this. The general concept is your motherboard has to be compatible with your CPU, and just make sure you roughly understand the differences between the two of them that we just talked about. All right. Okay, let's go to the next one. The next one is multi-socket. Guys, multi-socket literally just boils down to the fact that a computer will have more than one CPU socket. If you have more than one CPU socket, you can do way more than one thing at a time. You can do a lot more in a lot less time. So you would have each CPU installed into a dedicated socket on the motherboard. Generally, you would have this in servers for handling large-scale data processing, in a workstation, which is like a really good workhorse of a desktop, used specifically for demanding applications. If you're doing things like 3D rendering, scientific simulations, and virtualization, things that need a lot of processing power, multi-socket just means you're having more than one CPUs, and that particular motherboard has more than one socket for CPUs. You can have more than one CPU in there. It is multi-socket. That's pretty much it. Okay. The next thing we need to know about is the BIOS, or the Unified Extensible Firmware Interface, otherwise really known as the UEFI settings. So first of all, what is the BIOS slash UEFI? Your computer has an operating system on it. You turn on your computer and your operating system comes to life. It says Windows or Mac, right? Before that happens, there's still an underlying system that is responsible for making sure that your computer is running and actually getting you to your operating system running. That system is your BIOS, okay? Now, your BIOS handles all of your key computer components. So it makes sure that every necessary piece of hardware is working. And it also has some very specific settings that really relate specifically to the hardware of your device and the specific functions of your device. The BIOS is basically just the older version, and you can see here it's text-based, right? It's very text-based. It looks like something you might see in a 1990s, 1980s movie, whereas the other one, the UEFI, or you don't have to know the long word really, just the UEFI, is contains a graphical user interface where you can actually kind of click on things, right? As if you're in a video game menu. That's the primary difference. It's just like how modern it is. The BIOS is older and is text-based, whilst the UEFI is newer and has a graphical user interface. You can click on it, like you can go beep, boop, I want this one, I want this one, right? That's pretty much the main difference. Now, of course, there's more differences than that. The BIOS is older, and as a result, it's going to have some limitations. It's going to have slower boot times and a maximum storage device size of 2 terabytes, whereas the UEFI is newer, so it can keep up to date with those more modern things that we need. So it has some enhanced features. You've got faster boot times, support for larger storage devices. It has a graphical interface, as we talked about, and advanced security features such as secure boot. And we're going to talk about what secure boot is. Okay, we are going to talk about what that is coming up. So when it comes to this, we are going to need to know about the specific types of settings we can actually play around with in this BIOS or UEFI of our device. And we're going to have to really know what we can and cannot change. Okay, so the first thing we can change is the boot options. So in the BIOS or the UEFI, you can basically change what you boot from and in what order you try to boot from. So if you have a USB hard drive, maybe an SSD, and maybe another hard drive connected in the BIOS, you can say, hey, first I want to try to boot from the USB, and then if there's nothing there, I want to try to boot from the hard drive, and then if there's nothing there, you can say the order that you want to try to boot things from. Okay, now this can be tricky when it comes to particularly the troubleshooting section of your exam, because sometimes what can happen is you might plug in a USB to your device, and then what happens is your BIOS might automatically start trying to boot from this USB, but you don't have anything you can boot from there. So you'll find yourself in this predicament where before you plug the USB in, you were really happy, everything was working well. Then you plug your USB in, and all of a sudden you're getting this, I can't find a bootable device to boot from message. Sometimes that can be because your boot order has automatically updated to try to boot from the USB. So you need to go into your BIOS and actually say, hey, don't try to boot from the USB, instead try to boot from the hard drive first. All right, so that's what you basically need to know. Long story short, just that you can configure the boot sequence in the BIOS or UEFI to prioritize specific devices. In your BIOS or UEFI, you can also have a look at your USB permissions. So you can basically turn USB permissions on or off, so you can completely disable any USB slots. You can enable or disable USB ports to prevent unauthorized access. So that way, if someone tries to stick a USB in your device, it won't do anything because you've actually disabled that permission. So that's a good security step you potentially do. You can also restrict certain types of USB devices or enable USB security features too. So there's a lot of more advanced ones that you can do, but basically just know you can fiddle with your USB permissions. Right? That's pretty much it. You can turn them on or off. Largely, that's what you're going to need to know for your exam. The next thing we need to know is that we can change things to do with our Trusted Platform Module, or our TPM. Now, we're going to cover that coming up, what it is, but I'm trying to stick to the order of the exam objective. So essentially, right, we've got this photo of this guy. He looks like a security guard, and he is looking at security-based stuff. He's like inside a building, and he's, oh, security, I'm looking out for what's happening around here, trying to catch some troublemakers. That's pretty much what your TPM is, okay? Your TPM is like this little, not little, I'm sure he's big and muscular. It's like this security guard, but if he were a chip that were on your motherboard, okay? So TPM is a hardware-based security feature that provides encryption and secure authentication. It is a chip that is on your motherboard, okay? So in your BIOS or UEFI, you can enable TPM, which would make sure that your system can leverage advanced security features for data protection. So you can turn the TPM on or off and mess with the features a little bit, okay? So keep that in mind. We'll talk more about TPM later. You can also adjust your fan settings. You can start to consider some things. You know, maybe if your computer's starting to heat up more frequently, you can ramp up the fans, or you can ramp them down, etc. So you can control your fan speed and your fan profiles. You can configure what fans to run at different speeds depending on the system temperature or workload at the time. You can change your fan settings. Is basically what you need to know there. All right. You also can activate something called secure boot, right? If you find yourself in this predicament where you've got people trying to come in and hack into your system before it's even booted up, you're just trying to boot it up, and these ninjas are coming in and trying to boot up your system, you know what? Guess what? Don't even worry about it, because if you activate secure boot using the UEFI, right? This is an advanced feature with the UEFI, not necessarily in the older BIOS. It is something that's designed to protect your system from malware during the boot process. So basically, it ensures that only trusted signed operating system files can be executed during startup. So before you even get to your operating system, before your operating system has booted up, Secure Boot is like this guy. He's protecting your device from any potential malware that might be attacking. Okay. So Secure Boot is especially important for preventing boot level attacks or unauthorized modifications to the OS. So before your OS has booted, Secure Boot is going to stop that malware from being able to activate. Long story short, at a broad level, what you need to understand for this exam. When it comes to your Security Plus, you'll need to know more, but for now, that's absolutely all you need to know. The next thing is a boot password. You can use the BIOS or UEFI to set up a password that you need to enter before your system boots up, which would, of course, increase safety features, right? That's it, really. Same thing for a BIOS password. The BIOS password is another password you can activate, which would prevent unauthorized users from changing system configuration. So if you want to access your BIOS, you would actually need to put in a password. You can't just have anyone go into your computer, press the right keys, go into the BIOS, and then start changing things. No, they first need to enter a password. So this guy is trying to hack into his wife's BIOS to make sure she stops purchasing Desperate Housewives things. So he wants to change the fan settings so that whenever his wife gets on the computer, it heats up and explodes, but he can't because she activated the BIOS, all right, a password, and he doesn't know it, so he's feeling frustrated. So the BIOS password helps with that, essentially, okay? Now, temperature monitoring as well. In the BIOS or UEFI, you can keep track of your system's hardware temperatures, such as the CPU, GPU, or motherboard chipset. It often includes temperature readouts and alerts to prevent overheating and protect components too. So you can configure alerts or automatic system shutdowns if the temperature exceeds safe limits. So you can fiddle with those settings as well. Virtualization support is another thing that we do need to know about for this exam. Virtualization support. In order to use virtual machines, which is something we'll get into in a lot of detail in exam objective 4.1 or 4.2, don't worry too much about what they are yet and how they work, but just know if you want to use a virtual machine, you need to have virtualization support. Basically, I'm going to cut through all this text for you and just zoom in and say, if you are looking at an Intel CPU, you need to make sure that they have Intel VTX. If you're looking at an AMD CPU, you need to make sure there is AMD V, okay? You need to have those in order to be able to use anything requiring virtualization, such as virtual machines, all right? If you don't have that, you really can't do that. And you're going to need to make sure that you activate that in your BIOS or UEFI settings. Sometimes it can be turned off, just turn it on. Number one, check if you have it. Number two, if it's off, turn it on. Otherwise, you won't be able to use virtual machines, all right? That's pretty much it. Activating it is like making your CPU do this. It's like, all right, virtualization support is activated. Now you can go and use virtual machines. Long story short, just know what the names for the Intel version and AMD version are, and know that you need to check for that virtualization support in order to be able to do that stuff. Sorry, guys, I am like at the end of the workday. Sometimes my brain just starts to shut down on me. Encryption is another thing, all right? Encryption basically makes any data being sent unreadable. So it is the process of transforming data into an unreadable format to protect its confidentiality. You know, all the green letters in a matrix, and when that comes down, that's like encrypted letters and stuff. It's just gibberish, right? You encrypt it at one end, you send it, and it's unencrypted at the other end. But if anyone catches it in the middle, it just looks like gibberish. Now, the TPM, remember we were talking about that before. The TPM, it looks like this, roughly. It looks something like this. And you might think, what is that? What the heck? Let me tell you about it. The TPM, long story short, is a specialized security chip embedded in a device's motherboard. What does it do? Right? It provides a hardware-based layer of protection by securely generating and storing cryptographic keys. You're going to learn a lot more about what cryptographic keys are, how they work, the general concept. We talked about it when we did the spam management in email spam filtering a while ago when we looked at DKIM. That idea that you generate a private key and a public key, and you can use those to encrypt and decrypt particular messages or data. In that case, it was email headers. But just know that basically the TPM is a hardware chip that goes on your motherboard that does cryptographic keys in order to encrypt data. That, long story short, that's what you need to know. It is embedded onto the device's motherboard. It does full disk encryption by decrypting data only when system integrity checks pass. So what that basically means is if someone steals your device and they try to access it, if you have your TPM on and active, they actually won't be able to activate it or access your data because it's going to be encrypted. It generates and securely stores any cryptographic keys that it has, and it provides hardware-based cryptographic capabilities. Okay, so it's a hardware chip that goes on the motherboard that functions with cryptographic keys and helps you have full disk encryption. Long story short, okay, don't worry about the details, guys. You just need to roughly know what I told you. It's A+ exam. It's broad, but it's not deep. All right. Okay, I'll tell you when you really need to focus on stuff. Now, that was the TPM. The hardware security module is basically like a bigger, badder version of that on steroids, and it's an actual physical piece of hardware outside the device. Remember, the TPM was a chip on your motherboard. The HSM, hardware security module, is a piece of hardware. So it is a standalone device designed for cryptographic operations. It can do a lot more, a lot faster. Long story short, it is ideal for enterprise use, okay? Ideal for enterprise use. Now we're on to CPU architecture. Guys, I'm going to really try to simplify this and break it down. Long story short, right? Different CPUs have different architectures. Some are old, some are modern. Some can do less, some can do more. So long story short, what we have is this idea that we have the 8.6 architecture and the 6.4. The 8.6 is modern, right? The 8.6 is modern. The 6.4... The 8.6 is the older architecture, and the 6.4 is the newer architecture. So if your CPU architecture is 8.6, x86, it's going to look something like this. It's going to have cobwebs. It's going to be able to use older software and programs, but it's not going to be able to run any newer software or programs that require a 64 CPU architecture. Whereas the x64 architecture is new and modern and can handle all of those modern x64 architecture programs and applications, and it can also be backwards compatible and run those older ones as well. Now, what does x86 and x64 mean? Long story short, it's referencing the bits. So x64 just means it's 64 bits, right? So there's more bits, there's more power, there's more processing power there. So it's a 64-bit processor. This is the one that is found in most modern operating systems and devices. It basically allows for greater computational power. So it can do more, it can run more, etc. So you can actually have a look to see what kind of operating system you're running. You may be running a 64-bit version of Windows. If you've got a modern one, you probably are. 64-bit version of Mac or Linux, right? For every operating system, you'll either be running a 32-bit or a 64-bit. Now, the x86 architecture just means 32-bit. I know it's confusing because 86 is bigger than 64, but 64 is 64-bit, but then 86 is 32-bit. What? I don't know. I just thought of like 8 as this character who's an old man in my head, which helped me work it out. But x86 means 32-bit, and basically that is a 32-bit processor which can do less. That's pretty much what you need to know, right? It handles 32 bits of data at a time, which is a lot less than 64 bits at a time, and it has a memory limit of about 4 gigabytes. So it's slower, it can do more. Really, what you need to know, for the most part, guys, is just that concept that 64-bit operating systems can run 32-bit, but 32-bit cannot run 64-bit. Really, that's it. Okay, that's largely what you need to know. The next thing we need to know about is something called advanced RISC machines, or reduced instruction set computer. Now, long story short, these are devices that are designed for speed and accuracy with not a lot of power and heat being produced. So, a small device is designed to do a couple of specific things, and it's designed to do them really, really efficiently. Think about it in terms of it's called ARM, Advanced RISC Machine. What that means is it's not the full body. It's not designed to walk around and do everything. No, it's just the arm, right? It's just the arm. It's designed to do one thing. That's be the arm, and it's designed to be really good at being the arm. All right. So it is, long story short, right? It's a processor architecture designed for speed and efficiency while minimizing power usage. So it wants to be really fast and efficient. It wants to have low power and heat. And generally, you're going to find it used in mobile and Internet of Things devices, things that don't really have that many things to do, but they need to not produce a lot of heat, and they need to be really efficient at what they do. So not in really high resource desktops or laptops or anything like that, right? How do they do what they do? Well, they use a simplified instruction set, which basically allows them to execute tasks quickly and efficiently. So it's very streamlined, right? They've got one thing to do and they're doing it efficiently and effectively, and they're doing it without making a lot of heat, right? They're designed to consume less power, making it ideal for battery-powered devices, and it generates less heat as well, all right? Now, this is separate from the 32-bit and 64-bit architectures. This is a RISC machine. This is very specific type of architecture. Now, usually you'll find it in smartphones, tablets, smartwatches, Internet of Things devices. That's it, guys. Just know it's designed to do a specific thing. It's designed to use not a lot of power, and it's designed to not produce a lot of heat. It is the ARM. Just the ARM, nothing else. Okay, we're almost there, guys. I promise we're almost there. We're now looking at core configurations. Long story short, you can have one CPU, right? But within that CPU, you can have one core, two cores, three cores, four cores, multiple cores. And what this means is the more cores that you have, the more of a processing capability you have, the more things you can do at once. Some modern CPUs often have multiple cores within the one CPU in order to improve performance and multitasking capability. So the more cores you have, the more expensive it's going to be, but the more things you're going to be able to do at once, the more efficiently and effectively, right? That's pretty much what you need to know. That's largely what you need to know about that concept, guys. Not a whole lot more than that. Expansion cards is the next thing, and we know the idea of expansion cards. There's a wide variety of expansion cards you can use. You can install a sound card. You can install a video card. You can install a capture card. Now, a capture card records or streams video and audio input from external devices, such as cameras or gaming consoles. So if you're someone who wants to capture your gameplay content, you might want to use a capture card in order to do that. And you can install a network interface card or a NIC. We've talked a lot about that in the earlier ones. That's what gives you a wired or wireless internet connection. So you install all of those on a PCIe or PCI slot. But if it's a modern one, it's going to be a PCIe slot, right? And just, I guess the main thing is that video card is generally going to be a card that's handling the rendering and outputting of graphics. It's going to have its own GPU or graphics processing unit, and generally it would also come with its own VRAM, which is memory dedicated to the processing of graphics and visuals. All right, just know that about a video card. That's pretty much it. Finally, the last thing on this exam objective. I know this has been kind of a big one and probably getting longer than I'd like it to be. Cooling. There's multiple ways to cool your devices, and there's a couple of pieces of hardware we need to understand. The first one is fans, right? Fans blow cool air through your device. The less leads and cables you have in your case, the more efficiently they're going to be able to do that. So sometimes the solution is like reduce the cabling or organize it better so that the airflow is better. It's not always to put more fans in, but just know fans push air through your case. I'm sure we know that though, right? Surely. The next thing is a heat sink. Now, a heat sink is something that goes between your CPU, and it usually is between your CPU and a fan. Basically, it looks something like this. It can sometimes be a circle as well, but you'd be looking for those multiple metal components spread out. It's dispersing the heat, all right? It disperses the heat across that whole area, and usually you have a fan on top of it as well. So this would be placed on top of your CPU with a fan on top, so the heatsink is dispersing that heat out, and the fan is further cooling it down, all right? And now you can attach the heatsink to your CPU in two ways. You can do it with thermal paste or with thermal pads. Thermal paste is what's being applied in this image here. Long story short, you would squirt it on, push your heatsink down, and it would become one with your CPU, I guess, right? It'd be attached. It's very secure, and it could, if you don't get the measurement right, it can kind of spill over, but if you're good with it, it should be fine. Thermal pads are another one. They have a similar function, but they're not as efficient. They kind of move around a little bit, but they are leak resistant, right? You don't have to worry about getting your measurements perfect and like making sure none of it's falling down the sides there. So you can also trim it to fit specific sizes. The final one is liquid cooling, guys. So, you know, generally you'll find this in these really high-tech looking cases and machines. Liquid cooling systems circulate cool water through the computer, absorbing heat from components like the CPU and the GPU. You can see, guys, the water is circulating through these pipes and it's being cooled, right? So you've got cool water circulating through. Of course, that's going to cool down your machine. Now, as you can imagine, this is going to be a more expensive method of cooling than just using the standard heat sinks and fans. If you got this, it's going to be because you have a lot of money and because your device is producing a lot of heat. Take into account budget, all right? For your exam, you may be asked like, hey, when it comes to cooling options, which one do you recommend for me? Here's my budget, here's my requirements. Look at the budget. If they don't have a lot of budget, you're probably not going to want liquid cooling. If they have a really high intensity gaming machine and they have a big budget, then sure, liquid cooling could be good. In fact, now guys, look, it's that time where we look at the questions. I'm going to give you some questions and I'm going to get you to have a guess at what the right and what the wrong answer is. Let's get to it because I know I'm losing my voice and I'm sure you're sick of listening to it. The first question reads, a customer is building a compact home theater PC that needs to fit into a small media center enclosure. The design constraints require a motherboard with minimal footprint, featuring only one PCI Express slot, 2 DIMM slots, and overall dimensions of approximately 6.7 inches by 6.7 inches. Based on these characteristics, which motherboard form factor is being described? A. ATX, B. MicroATX, C. ITX, D. DIMM. Take a few seconds to think about it, and then we're going to get straight to your answer. Let's go ahead and get to it. 3, 2, 1. Pause the video. Okay, here we are. C, it was ITX, guys. So look, ITX is compact motherboard form factor characterized by its small size. Usually you're looking at about 6.7 by 6.7. So the measurements were one of the key giveaways there. And he also talked about wanting a compact machine, very compact, only 2 RAM slots, only 1 PCI slot, pretty much no room for expansion. Remember we said that MicroATX has about 4 expansion slots, ATX can have about 7. ITX, this one only had 1. That's pretty characteristic. That in combination with the size, and they were talking about really, really compact. Yeah, that was the right answer. So just know ATX is big with lots of expansion. MicroATX is like in the middle with about 4 expansion slots. ITX is even smaller, and really you're not going to be able to do much expansion there at all. Now, the next question coming up, let's go ahead and have a go. The question reads, while assembling a custom desktop PC, a builder needs to connect a new solid-state drive. The solid-state drive uses a cable with an L-shaped connector that only fits one way into a corresponding port on the motherboard. This port is clearly not intended for adding expansion cards or supplying power. Based solely on these details, which motherboard connector type is being described? A. PCI, B. PCIe, C. SATA, D. Power connector. Have a guess. We're going to your answer in 3, in 2, in 1. Pause the video if you need more time. Let's go. It is C. SATA. Guys, first of all, we should have known that it is a SATA because it said it's plugging in an SSD. That's the cable used to connect drives, but it also specified it had an L-shaped design. Remember that little lip? SATAs have that little weird lip on it. That's another way we can identify them. So it said it's definitely not used for expansion slots. PCI, PCIe are both used for expansion slots, and it did not mention anything about power. So you're connecting a drive. All right, so that's what we need to know. Now, next question, when it unblurs itself, is a digital content creator is planning a new PC build focused on video editing, multitasking, and rendering. They want a system that not only delivers strong multi-core performance and energy efficiency, but also allows for future CPU upgrades without necessitating a new motherboard every time a new generation is released. Based on these requirements and the differences in CPU socket compatibility for AMD and Intel, which manufacturer's platform should they consider? A. Intel. B. AMD. C. Both AMD and Intel offer similar levels of upgradability and socket compatibility. D. Neither. They should opt for a different architecture outside of AMD and Intel. Pause the video if you need more time. Should I give you a hint for this one? There's your first hint. There's your second hint. Okay, let's go to the answer. Pause the video if you need more time. 3, 2, 1, let's go. The answer is going to be, when it unblurs itself. Wow, way to build tension accidentally. Come on. There we go. B, AMD, guys. So they said they didn't want to have to upgrade consistently. AMD is known for their long life compatibility. And also it talked about what was it? Multi-core performance. All right, multi-core performance is another thing AMD is known for. All right, so those were the kind of the giveaways. Whereas Intel, generally, it changes its CPU sockets more frequently and is less available to upgradability. Yeah, so we need to know the differences between those two. Sorry, guys, my brain is dying today. I've run out of coffee and it's time to go home. Question 7 reads, after assembling a custom desktop PC, a technician powers it on for the first time. Before the operating system even begins to load, a screen appears displaying the computer manufacturer's logo alongside a simple menu. This menu allows the technician to adjust settings such as the boot sequence, CPU overclocking, memory timings, and power management options. Additionally, the system runs basic diagnostics like verifying the status of the memory and CPU, which component is responsible for these functions. A, the operating system's bootloader. B, the BIOS/UEFI. C, a diagnostics utility installed on the hard drive. D, a device management tool within the operating system. Go ahead and take a guess. 3, 2, 1. Let's go. The answer is, oh man, that's slow net today, hey? Here we go. B, the BIOS UEFI. So just remember, guys, the BIOS/UEFI, BIOS being the older version, UEFI being the more modern version with the graphical user interface, is what we use before the operating system boots up to do all those device level changes and change those things in the system. Okay, we talked about that. I'm not going to go into any more detail. Do I want to do another one? Oh, how many questions did I have? Okay, damn, I made a lot of questions for you guys in this one. All right, which of the following can you not configure in the BIOS or UEFI? A, adjust fan settings. B, activate a proxy server. C, enable secure boot. D, setting a boot password. Pause the video one more time. 3, 2, 1. I'm speeding it up a bit. The answer is examine information. The answer is activating a proxy server, guys, for that one. And the reason that is because, yes, you can adjust fan settings. Yes, you can enable secure boot. Yes, you can set a boot password. We talked about all that today. All right. Now, the next question reads, Michael plans to set up a series of virtual machines for software testing on his workstation. Before he begins, he needs to confirm that his system's hardware supports virtualization. To do this, Michael reboots his computer and enters the BIOS/UEFI settings, where he looks for a specific option that indicates whether his CPU can efficiently allocate resources among multiple virtual environments. Which setting should Michael be checking for? A, VTX or AMDV. B, whether his device uses a Type 1 or Type 2 hypervisor. C, virtualization emulator. Or D, if secure boot is enabled. Pause the video if you need more time. Your answer coming in 3, 2, 1. Here we go. It is. He should be looking for a VTX or AMDV. So VTX for Intel or AMDV for ATX motherboards, I believe. Sorry, not AMD. CPUs. Sorry, guys, brain's exploding. So yes, that's what we need to look for before we can use virtual machines or any virtualization technology. Right, virtual machines. You need to have a look at your Intel for VTX or AMDV for your AMD. Okay, so that's what we need to look for. The last two. Holy smokes! Tell you what, guys, my voice is dying. Pause the video, read it, have a go, answer comment in 3, 2, 1. Is that right? Yep. Okay, there's your answer. Pause. Going to move on. Pause the video if you want to read that. And read that. Pause the video. Have a go. 3, 2, 1. All right. And read that. That's your answer. Okay. Sorry, guys. I'm just dying. There's so many there. And guys, I've got a free practice exam for you if you want to see like how ready you are for the exam. The link is in the description and the pinned comment below. You've got 3 performance-based questions in that exam. You've got 90 multiple choice questions, okay? So it gives you a really good idea of how ready you are. And if you want my help really holding your hand and guiding you through this entire process, you can go and grab my Ultimate Learning Guide package over at journeytosabit.com. In that, I give you the learning guide, which is where all this stuff is for, guys. Right now, I'm dying, so I can't do all these multiple choice questions with you. There's just so many. This is just a small snippet. In the learning guide, you get everything broken down by exam objectives. Even the multiple choice questions are broken down by exam objective as well to really help you study. You also get 3 full-length practice exams, each of which has a performance-based question. You get interactive troubleshooting performance-based question simulations. You can actually click on the buttons and interact with it, and a spreadsheet to track your progress with specific study guidance there too. It helped this guy pass his exam, and it'll help you do the same. Okay, so let's have a look. Right, the learning guide is broken down by exam objective, and even further into dot point, and even further into sub dot point. For all of this, you get you get notes on all of it, which for some reason I didn't take a screenshot of. You get performance-based questions, multiple choice questions, multiple choice answers, just like you've seen here today. You also get 11 in total performance-based questions for the whole learning guide. And then you get your interactive troubleshooting simulation as well. You can click on these buttons, click on that. It'll take you to some troubleshooting. You can click on each of these photos. They'll all have an issue for you to try to solve. And, you know, you've got printer ones. There's one for each of the primary troubleshooting exam objectives there, essentially. I also give you a video showing you how to use AI to really hone in and learn quickly and effectively once you've identified your weak points. I show you exactly how to do that. And I also show you exactly how to use multiple choice questions to study. Most people don't know how to do what they think they do, but they don't. All right, so look at me. I'm in there waiting for you. Look, guys, if you've enjoyed this, you don't need to go to journeytocyber.com/1201 in order to get this and like 100% fast track your success. No, you can just use these free resources. I'm going to keep putting this free course out till it's done. I'm going to continue to do free quizzes with performance-based questions for free on YouTube, all for free. So if you don't want this, you don't need to do it, but I'm just telling you, it's the best value out there that there is. If you want it, go grab it. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next one, guys. I will see you in the next one. Thanks for choosing me to help walk you through into that exam room. Let's do it. See you next time. I'm going to go take a nap.